and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today I'm joined by Michel Lieben. Michel received his bachelor's degree in economics in 2016 and then started his career as a marketing specialist and growth marketer for 4 years before starting his most recent and current venture, where he serves today as the founder and CEO of ColdIQ, an agency that helps B2B companies scale their outbound prospecting activities. Michel is a certified expert with modern growth tools like Clay, Instantly, and Smartlead, and has built outbound systems for over 100 B2B sales organizations. So I'm particularly excited to get his thoughts on all that's changing in B2B sales and find out specifically what he thinks is working and what isn't in the world of outbound prospecting. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated. Without further ado, let's dive in and get his thoughts. Michel, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Collin. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, I'm excited to chat with you. There's so many debates going on in the space right now. And so what I've been doing over the last, 20 plus episodes is bringing in different experts and just getting their thoughts on a lot of these topics. And one that I have not spoken with yet is someone who's doing sort of outsource SDR work, right? So there's a lot of debate going on around AI replacing SDRs. I just signed on as an advisor with AI SDR, and so I'm working with them, and I'm trying to learn everything that's going on, right? So I want to get your thoughts on some of these topics, and then I want to obviously dive into everything you're working on, because I think when talking about someone who's successfully doing sort of the outsourced, outbound model, I feel like if you can crack that code, you probably have a better pulse on what's going on than most people because you're working with so many different companies at once, right? So I'm particularly excited to chat with you for that reason. But let's dive in. I want to start at the top here, and I've been sort of changing the way I've been asking this question. I was at first asking people like, hey, what's broken with B2B outbound and how did we get here? But some people don't necessarily think it's broken. And so I've rephrased the question, and we'll just let you run in whatever direction you want to. But the way I phrased it now is traditional outbound sales broken, dead, or dying? If yes, how so? So wherever you'd like to go with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's great that you reframe the question because I wouldn't agree on the fact that it's dead. I would say it is dying, or at least it is changing. Just because what we see, and it's a great point that you made about having a lot of data on lots of clients, is that there are some patterns we see where all clients are equally affected of these changes on the market. And so we actually have someone from our team that used to be doing outbound for just one company. And then she said to me one day, she said, actually, I didn't know that much about outbound because it's easy to make it work for one company, but having to handle a few clients at the same time, it's another sort of challenge. And so, for example, the biggest shift we are seeing is across the board, deliverability is just much more difficult to crack. And so whichever the client is, whether the campaigns are performing extremely well or not performing great, it's just much more difficult to get in the inbox. And so if you think about, say, specifically email outreach, then it's just almost like you need some sort of new skills because it had just happened. It just became extremely technical. You used to be able to just write a few emails manually. You would add some links. You wouldn't really care about the formatting of it. Now, what you need to do is actually you need to have your DMARC, your SPF, your DKIM set up. You need to make sure that if you're going to be doing some sort of scale, that you're not repeating the exact same template, that you're using some spin tags. And so for this reason, I think that the role is evolving because, what used to be one thing where you would be having a few SDRs doing the calling and the emailing and all of that stuff, just on their own. I think it's something that you need to rearrange to be extremely efficient in teams. And so what I mean by that is now with technology, you have platforms that mimic extremely well, the sort of personalization that a human would do. And so one thing that we like to say to new clients is we tell them, hey, imagine you have unlimited time to write the perfect email. It's what would you look for? What's the first thing you look on their LinkedIn profile, on their website? what's the exact situation they need to be in? Did they raise some money? Did they are they hiring someone in some departments? Did someone leave? And did someone important in the team leave? Because it's now with technology, you can actually surface all of this data at scale. And so this is one piece of the puzzle. And the other piece of the puzzle is like you need to be building some systems where you can get in the inbox. And so the way I see it is where you could have SDR to the emailing and the calling and the LinkedIn DMing. Like I feel like now what you want to have is you want to have an email specialist that's gonna take care of getting you in the main inbox, plus say finding some ways to kind of scale some sort of micro personalization. So this is one on one hand, this is one thing you want, and on the other hand, you want the less technical people to really lean into the human side of selling. So, for example, when you think of AI SDRs, they are mostly focused on automating the emailing and LinkedIn function. It's like I think that even in the US, you cannot even legally like do these AI outbound calls. In Europe, it's gonna be even more restricted, anyways. And so I feel like if you're an SDR, then you want to lean either into being extremely technical or just focusing and improving your just like cold coding skills, because at this time AI cannot do that well. And so I think this is the biggest shift. Is really the say most savvy organizations are already reshifting teams to fit this new way of doing it. And I feel these are the ones that win at the moment.
Wow. So, okay, you hit on some really good stuff here. So, I can tell why you've been successful at this so far, just based on that right there. You're thinking about the team very differently than it has been thought about historically. Historically, it was sort of like a production line, right? You bring in a bunch of people, predictable revenue, so to speak. You give them all the same training. They all do the same process, and you're really specializing things, right? It sounds like you're trying to figure out the data side, you're trying to figure out the personalization side, and you're trying to figure out who's good at which thing, right? And so you're sort of breaking up the team into these specialized functions, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Because at the top of your answer, I think you started by saying it's just gotten very complicated, right? It's there's so much nuance to it, whereas when it used to be pick up the phone and here's 100 leads, and it's just so you have to know how to use all these different tools, and it's not one skill set, right? I think that's what you're saying, is that it's not just really one person or hiring profile who's going to be great at this. You're probably going to be able to best find people who are great at it by splitting it up. The person who's going to be great maybe at working with clay, maybe they're terrible at talking to a prospect on the phone, right? And instead of going, I guess, that uphill battle of trying to teach everyone how to do everything, your method here is let's specialize and split it off, which makes a lot of sense because that's how the SDR role was created in the first place, right? Was that it was a specialization from the AE role as they started to see these complications. So I like the way you're thinking about that. I want to add in just a little sort of caveat question to that, because I'm curious to get your thoughts here. How long do you think it takes now to ramp up and train a new SDR when you bring them in, like let's say straight out of college, no experience? Has that changed? Is it now taking longer, or is it maybe less time because you're specializing the roles? You don't have to teach them as much. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's like we've been training mostly GTM engineers, so this new breed of roles where they are the ones who sit in spreadsheet all day and are not cold coding specifically. And for them, like the ramp up process is a bit different because it's a new role. And so, for example, like this is something where the SDR has been here for say like years, for decades, but here the GTM engineers, like how do you train for a role that exists like since just like 2 to 3 years? And so what we see is that it does take months to have someone even being proficient with the tools. But then once they're proficient with the tools, you need to teach them the actual, say, business know-how, business knowledge. So for us, what we say, it's gonna take like from 3 to 6 months to have someone ready to take care of a few clients' campaigns. Um, when you're speaking about the SDR specifically, this is not something I have that much experience in because this is not, the part of the equation that we are handling ourselves.
Got it. Okay, so that makes sense. So for the go-to-market engineers, roughly 3 to 6 months. So it sounds like a big part of your focus is on that side of the business, right? And it seems like what you've sort of figured out is if we get that right, we don't need like the abundance of maybe super rock star SDRs or whatever. You still have humans running motions and whatnot, but sort of like if we can get the data piece right, the engineering piece right, the process right, kind of everything just works out a lot easier, right? Which makes sense. I mean, if you have the worst salesperson on the team calling the best leads, they're going to do better than the best salesperson on the team calling the worst leads, right? Because if people are not looking to buy something, it doesn't really matter what you're, who's on the phone or who's making the sale. So I
Yeah.
like that. Cool. Well, let's dive into the second piece here, which I want to get, and I think we sort of hinted into it, but I want to get your take on like what's actually working today, right? I think, and you can tell me if you disagree, but I think it's safe to say that most people generally agree that like the predictable revenue model is pretty much not reaping the same results as before. You could say it's dead, you could say it's dying, whatever. But we're living in a new world, right? So, anything you want to elaborate on there? Do you want to double click on sort of any of those topics of what's actually working today?
Yeah, I mean, this is related to what I was saying before. I feel like what you want to do is you want to send either messages where when people receive the messages, they feel as though this was written manually. And the truth is, now with AI, you can surface so many data points that it's like, even if you knew that I wrote this email with AI, because I've talked about like say 4 or 5 different initiatives that are going on in your business, which happen to be the reason why I'm reaching out to you, then you think, okay, this email or this LinkedIn DM is relevant to me. And so if we talk specifically about email or LinkedIn DMs, what you want to do usually is that you want to be writing, emails manually as to you are trying to craft the perfect emails, and then you want to try to figure out how to scale this sort of emails when you see some patterns using tools like Clay, like Instantly and so on. And then like when it comes to so like the actual cold calling, so like cold calling still works, right? It's like I don't think I think actually yeah, it actually works even better than it used to. I mean, in the sense that more and more people are trying to hide between the technology and the automation. And so like the courageous ones that do pick up the phone will get some great results. So we do some cold calls, but what works even better is to actually combining, these outbound, say, email LinkedIn motion with the cold calling. And so, for example, like one of the things we do is we'll be contacting every person that say reacted to an email, to open an email, or that even like we're on our website or engage with our LinkedIn post, just because like they're already familiar with us. And so when we do call them, that's is for ourselves, we actually get much, much better reply rates. And so I'd say like having a mix of using AI to automate, all of these bits, like this research and like this personalization that will be probably 80% as good as the best email writer you can have. And on the other hand, like leaning into this great lists segmentation to then call the people who you identified are great leads is for us the winning formulas. And so this is what we are using, doing for ourselves. And our clients that get the best results are doing a mix of this. We're gonna use technology for the email, the LinkedIn, and then like take our SDRs who would have been doing those three things, like the say LinkedIn, the email plus calling, and we're gonna focus them on the calling bits just because it's a better way to rearrange the teams.
Got it. I like the way so you're sort of using the model as like, hey, let's do it manual and figure out what works. And then sort of how do we replicate that? Are there any little tricks? Like I hear people make jokes about like we want to intentionally put a typo, in the template or something to make it look human. Is there anything that silly that actually you recommend doing?
I wouldn't like. I think it's a gimmick, right? It's just this whole "oh, what school have you been?" Or just like if I like the whole send from my iPhone. I don't think
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
that's
think
a
it
good
gets
one.
anyone anymore. Like
That's
back
a
in the
common one.
days, yeah, back in the days, people used to believe in these small tricks, but now it's like I think they've seen it all. Just because just there are much more like emails being sent. Just because I guess like this is the downside of AI being able to replicate some of the things humans do is now I think like the scale and the volume being sent is much much bigger, which means that like from my perspective, every potential buyer is much more educated around what are people trying to do when they send me an email, which means that like the first thing they will be asking themselves is this relevant to me or is this not? And the fancy personalization added to some completely irrelevant email doesn't change anything.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the word irrelevant because as you're answering that question, I'm thinking to myself, like, if the email is relevant, you're hitting me at the right time, it's something I might be interested in or a problem I'm experiencing, I don't really care if it came from an AI. That's sort of my mindset on it. In fact, like it's like when you log into Instagram today, and let's say you were just having a text conversation on your iPhone with someone about some bizarre topic that you don't usually talk about. And then you go into Instagram and all of a sudden it's in your feed, right? And you're like, clearly, like Apple has an arrangement with all these social media companies and they know what topics you're talking about and stuff, right? And on one hand, you get a little bit upset. You're like, oh, they're violating my privacy, this and that. But on the other hand, you're like, is this really bad? Like it's showing me something that I was just talking about. And I'm actually curious to watch this video now because I was just talking about this, right? And so it's like, I think we're just in this realm of like, of discomfort, right? Because it's new and we sort of don't really know how to handle it. But I do think that as we get better at all of this stuff, like I don't know that humans are going to care so much if it's an AI or a human. Like I sort of am on the contrarian side there with like, and it's not to put down human salespeople at all, but it's like people just want things that make sense, right? And like if you're getting them, a message that makes sense, versus one that doesn't, it just really doesn't matter where it's coming from. That's sort of my take on that. And so I think what you're doing, all of it sort of adds up to well, for lack of a better term, making more sense in that regard because you're focusing so much on the go-to-market engineering side, getting the right data, that by time the message lands in someone's inbox, the things that shouldn't matter is like, was it an AI or a human, or was it, who sent the message, or like it really doesn't matter because you're just upping the quality so much. And I think that jives really well with the direction that the whole industry, needs to be moving
Yeah,
in. So that makes a
completely
lot of sense.
agree. Yeah, which is the reason why when you're using technology, you want to be using technology, to be almost guessing intent or trying to surface as many data points that let you know about the current initiatives or priorities of a company, as opposed to using it to trick people. So this is the difference between using AI to sort of seeing what's going on within a company versus using AI to fake the fact that I know you and just like give you a bunch of irrelevant information where now you think, oh, it seems like they know me. And then like now the pitch is completely irrelevant. And I feel like this is where some people actually misuse AI is they put too much focus on the personalization aspect of it, while you should be trying to segment as much as possible using the AI. Because I think like the truth is if you are actually segmenting your list manually, then you would obviously have a few criterias for why someone should be on your list or someone should not be on your list. And I feel like this is the biggest thing that AI lets you do is like this huge list of contacts you have and those criteria you have for should people be on this list or not can actually be done pretty fast by leveraging AI on these like huge contact lists.
I love it. So my next question was going to be, what are the most important tools for outbound sales prospecting? But maybe we'll want to focus specifically on the go-to-market engineer here. And since I think this is probably what people are most curious about. I mean, if you want to drop in what you're using for, sending emails and whatnot, I think that's fine. But probably all those tools do most of the same things. But maybe before we jump into that, do you want to give a bit of a description of what the go-to-market engineer role is, sort of what you're looking for and what tasks you, sort of train them to do, just so we're clear on that for anyone who might be confused?
Yeah. So essentially, when I talk about GTM engineers, I'm talking about people who will be running campaigns for say five, six, seven clients at a time. And typically what they'll do is they'll be actually taking care of the whole, say, prospecting campaigns, but mostly email and LinkedIn prospecting campaigns. And where it differs is that they will be very knowledgeable about gathering some data points and then ensuring that the messages that we write actually land on the main inbox. So typically, like the work of a GTM engineer is being able to surface some very niche data, leveraging this data within like a very relevant message, and then like send this message to as many people who will get this message. So it's not too different from a typical SDR, because like the only difference is that an SDR wouldn't be doing that in such a tech heavy way, while for a GTM engineers, we're trying to do this at some sort of scale, which means that we'll be using some tools that help us do all of these steps.
Got it. So let's dive into that. I mean, I imagine Clay is one of those tools, but can you talk to me about, like, let's just pretend I know nothing about this whole go-to-market engineering world. What are the top tools? What do they need to know how to use? And give me just a high level of what they do. Make it kind of elementary so we can start there.
Yeah, exactly. So like the way, like in my opinion, like the way I see a successful outbound campaign is a mix of I have great data, as in the person I'm going to be reaching out to is very relevant. I have great deliverability, as in the message I send, whether I send it on LinkedIn or via email, will land. And the next thing is like is the messaging bit. So it's like when you do read the message, it's actually reads pretty easily. And then you've got the automation side of things where it's like, whatever action you do, you're gonna be able to scale it at some sort of scale. So like for the first bit, which is the data part, which is, in my opinion, the most important part, because it's like I can send a bad message to the wrong person. I can send a bad message to the right person. Even though the message is bad, they would still be likely to hear my pitch. And so this is where we need the most sophisticated tools. And so you discussed Clay. And the reason we use Clay is because it plugs into 100 plus data sources. And so within their spreadsheet, they allow you to create some very sophisticated campaigns. And the best way I like to think about this is just whatever way you'd be thinking about, creating some extremely niche lists, like the kind of work that you do manually, where you really like, add a lot of conditions, a lot of criteria, and like try to find the data from 6, 7 data sources and like combine of this data is actually something you can do within Clay, and it can be done pretty fast. So, like most of the time, if you just give me one example of a list you'd want to build, I'll probably tell you that it's doable in Clay, and that I could probably do it within 30 minutes or 1 hour if it's not too complicated. And so Clay is, this platform that lets us do like this specific data enrichment. But even before Clay, what we'll do is we'll use some B2B databases, just because Clay doesn't always have like the most exhaustive initial data. So for example, like for these instances, you could use tools like Apollo. We use LinkedIn Sales Navigator because I do think that it's still one of the most updated B2B data professional database, essentially because I think like, the reason why Apollo got banned from LinkedIn is because they actually scraped the LinkedIn data. And so you'd use LinkedIn for the initial data, you'd use Clay to get some very precise list out of these initial B2B databases. And then once you have that and you have this list of prospects that you want to contact, then the next thing you want to be reaching them at some sort of scale. And so to be able to reach them at some sort of scale, you need some platform that automates the messages, whether you automate the messages via email or via LinkedIn, and you want a platform that takes care of this deliverability aspect of things. And so you have platforms like Instantly and Lemlist. Instantly, for example, they focus all their attention on the deliverability aspect of things. So really, like they allow you to do some secondary domains and inboxes, which means that you don't need to be using your main domain to send too many emails, which protects your main domain. They have some warmer pools. They have dedicated IP addresses. They use spin tags, or spin tags just make some variations out of a same message. So Instantly does that. Lemlist does that as well. I see the main difference between both these tools is that Instantly focuses exclusively on sending emails at scale and delivering your emails in the main inbox, while Lemlist is more multi-channel, and so they would do both LinkedIn and email. And so I think that if you have just like these tools, you already have a very good basis to replicate what most GTM engineers do. And it's actually, I think, the stack that most outbound agencies will be using, not just us.
Yeah, so I hear Clay brought up all the time now. But the one thing I'm a little bit, I guess, unclear on is I hear some people say they love it, it's easy to learn, but I hear other people say it's very complex. Would you say that, like, how long does it take for the average salesperson to learn that, or should it be just specifically for a go-to-market engineer sort of technical type, or do you think it's anyone can be using it?
Yeah, actually, I have a great perspective on this. I noticed the main difference between people who do learn it fast and the people who don't learn it fast. And it actually boils down to their existing technical skills. So something I see is if people have done some programming back in the days, for example, they will pick it up extremely easily. So like any person that has studied, some technical topic at university or that did some programming will get the logic of Clay because it no almost it works a bit like coding works. And this is something that's funny because one thing I see is a lot of GTM engineers are not like actually surfing the wave of vibe coding, AI coding, because it's just the natural evolution. Is if you think of Clay as a spreadsheet, is like the logic of building a campaign is really a if-else sort of logic like you would have in coding. And so it's really saying, okay, I've got this list of people. If there was a new job opening, for example, then like enrich the data. If not, don't enrich the data. And so it's like, okay, now like it's segmented. And then it's like, okay, now I'm gonna add some new condition. And so it has like this programming kind of vibes. I think that it is sort of complicated, as in it's not the easiest tool to learn. I actually think it's out of our stack the most complex tool to learn. But the issue is that the complexity of the tool is the reason why it's so powerful. Because what's powerful about Clay is not the fact that you can just reach out to anyone, it's the fact that any idea you have in terms of I want to be reaching out to these people and personalizing on these criterias and messaging them at this sort of scale is actually doable. But for this to be doable and for it to be doable in a powerful way for a lot of different people, it needs to have this, flexibility that makes it complex. And so I'll say, if you're struggling to learn Clay, I understand you.
So it's a bit of a catch-22. It's basically it is complex, but that's what makes it great, right? So it's sort of like if you have a tool that's quick and easy to use, you tend to learn it fast, but then you tend to like within a week, you're like, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. So it sounds like it's on that end of things. So anyway,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And I think that sort of jives with what the world needs right now, right? If we need more complex data, we need things to be more accurate. Like the tools are probably going to be a little bit more complex to figure out how to use. But to your point, if you're using go-to-market engineers rather than maybe you don't, if you have a team of 50 SDRs, maybe you don't need to teach them all how to use it. Maybe you can have a few people that are doing it for the whole team or whatnot. But let's get your thought on AI, sort of the AI SDR, world. What do you think's going on there? Do you think that we're going to see sort of a full replacement of human SDRs? Do you think that this is more of a tool that helps to supplement? What do you think's going to take place there?
Yes, I actually have a controversial take on this one. It's because most people I talk with disagree with me. But I think that the AI SDRs are very close to being better than SDRs at specifically email and LinkedIn prospecting. And so this is what I want to touch on because I don't think that there are any danger for the people who are great at cold calling. But like, when I think of, it's like when you think of an agency and an AI SDR, the business models are actually pretty similar because it's like on both hands, what we try to do is we try to maximize the number of clients for whom we have some great campaigns that perform. And it's like for both an agency and an AI SDR, we try to have it as much done for you as possible. Which means that like when I think of my agency, I'm just thinking, say like all of the moving pieces, all of the components, of service delivery. Typically, those components are actually humans, and like what kind of agent could I create that would replace all of the things they do? And so, from my perspective, if you focus on some very specific niche or use cases or personas, then you can make the AI zero work. But like the problem is that there are just so many different sort of campaigns and like personas and like way to address people that at this time, I don't think any AI SDR would be able to just like have some sort of one size fits all solution. And so what I see like the smart test AI SERs do is they focus on a specific vertical because they use the industry knowledge they have to kind of frame the outbound or the outreach differently, which makes it work for some verticals. And so I feel like what we'll be seeing now is we'll be seeing AI, some vertical AI SDRs starting to outperform, either individual SDRs or agencies, but we are not yet ready to see like the AI SDRs that outperforms for all industries. That said, I guess it's just like a numbers game. At some point, you outperform in so many industries that you come to the point where you're actually able to be as good as, any great GTM engineer that got some great insights from the company that they are servicing.
I think that might be the most astute answer I've heard to that question. And I agree 100%. And you've explained it better than I have. But that's basically how I've been seeing it, which is it's not something that's going to just work for everyone magically overnight. It's just like anything, it has to be developed. And it's the same that like if you were even when the SDR predictable revenue, became popular, it didn't just like take over all of outbound sales like overnight, right? It sort of was like similar companies to Salesforce started using it, and then it starts to sort of branch out and it starts to spread. But like that is the way AI works, is like it has to learn something and it has to learn it really well. And when you're the first cohort of doing that, you're starting from scratch, right? And everyone knows how hard it is to hire and train a team of SDRs that are human. So to train a machine to do that is also going to be very hard, but there's going to be a lot of upside because the machine will not make the same mistake twice. The machine will not be late to work. The machine will not give you an attitude. The machine will not beg for a promotion or quit. Like there's all of these things that are over time going to be the differentiators, right? Because to your point, it's just a matter of time, right? Before you sort of iterate and repeat those tasks. Because what I keep
Yeah.
going back to, and I'm glad you made the point on the cold calling, which is like, luckily the laws are in place, right? That like we don't want robots making phone calls to us. So if like we don't really have to worry about that. The human salesperson, at least for the foreseeable future, has a good foundation, right? And what I would argue is that most salespeople, even SDRs included, if you were to ask them like, do you really enjoy researching all of your prospects and typing up all these emails and like there's no way that that's the most enjoyable part of the job. And so it actually makes me a little bit confused when I see people even getting defensive and pushing against it, because it's like, do you love doing that all day? Would you not love to have a tool that could do that for you so that you could just pick up the phone and call the ones who responded and like talk to people who are qualified? Like that sounds like a way better life in sales, And maybe that means that you're going to be on a sales team of 5 people or 10 people instead of 50 or 100, but so what? Right? Like it's that's so much better. And it's the same type of stuff we've seen in every other industry, right? We saw it. I mean, Henry Ford did it when he, built the assembly line for building cars and interchangeable parts and all this type of stuff. And so, anyway, I'm going off the rails a little bit on that one, but I think you nailed it. And that aligns very well with what, I'm speaking with Yuri, who I'm advising now at AI SDR. It aligns very well with the way that they're looking at this. They sort of cast a wide net in the beginning. They said, like, let's bring in a bunch of leads, let's sign people up, let's see what happens, and then let's learn and let's figure out who this works best for, and let's iterate from there. But I think your prediction is probably very on par, because what's going to happen now, it's probably starting to happen right after, the 11X, all this sort of chaos going on, is what they're going to realize now is, hey, even though we have so much demand for this and we can sign up tons of people and we can make a ton of revenue overnight because they're just going to want to try it, it's going to kill our reputation if we can't actually deliver. So I think what you just predicted is going to come true over probably the next 6 to 12 months, is they're going to say, we're going to just focus on this vertical. We're going to focus on this ICP specifically because that's where it works really well. And then over time, that net will cast wider. So you nailed it, man. That was right on the money.
And the one thing I'll add is just this idea of companies will be using AI SDRs and then they'll say, oh, it doesn't work. And then it's like, once it doesn't work, then you just blame it on the AI SDRs. And it's like, okay, there's a few reasons why a campaign didn't work. Like there's also the possibility of, your product not being a product that people want to buy, or at least not a product that people want to buy cold.
Yeah.
And, it's like this idea of, let's say you were spending money on Facebook ads, and then you'd say, oh, Facebook ads don't work. I spent 10K, but then like I didn't get any clients from these. But like you don't blame Facebook ads when it doesn't work, but you do blame the AI SDR because for some reason, when the targeting is not right, or like something is not right, it's like this is the AI SDR's fault. But like if it's the Facebook platform, is we've seen enough cases of this actually working for us to say, okay, like this this actually works. And so I think like this is also like the thing, and actually we see it, for example, I actually have great data on this. So for example, one thing we started doing with our agency is we started tiering clients, just like for say the quality of the company. So we have the tier one clients, the tier two clients, and the tier three clients. And whenever we'd have churn, we'd be looking at who is churning. And so funny enough is the clients we consider the worst, who are the ones who are the most unhappy, and the ones who consider the best are the ones who are extremely happy. And so from the tier three clients who will be say pre-market fit, pre-money, like that have like very little revenue, it's like they're just putting it on us. It's ColdIQ's fault. And I guess for them, it's better to put it on us because then like this doesn't mean that they need to look at themselves and think, do we actually have a product that's, people want to get? While for a company that's proven already, then it's much more easy if the campaigns fail to say, yeah, it's ColdIQ's fault. But when the product is actually proven, then we actually have a very small failure rate.
Again, this aligns perfectly with what Yuri said. Is one of his first learnings was like, look, don't try to use AI to figure out outbound, right? Like if you have not proven that outbound works for you, you haven't found a process, a motion, a script, a template, whatever. You haven't found something that's proven to be repeatable. Bringing AI in to do it is idiotic, and we know this because this is how they design AI. They always start with a human who figures something out, and then the AI monitors what they do, and it learns from it, and then it starts to replicate it. I worked for a company called Zenny who was doing AI bookkeeping for finances, and it was the same thing. They had a whole team of humans in India doing it manually, and the idea was that they're monitoring everything that's happening and building automations to slowly replicate piece and piece and piece of the process, and eventually you phase the human out. And it's very much the same thing with SDR. I mean, first of all, outbound doesn't work for everyone, whether you're using humans or not. It's very, very hard. It is
It is.
the most difficult thing. So to think like, oh, I just took my product that like I'm a bootstrap startup or even a Series A, whatever. You're not a unicorn yet. There's not a tremendous amount of demand or anything for your products. It's all unproven. All of it's unproven. And then you're like, well, we're going to just try to go plug and play, some outbound, and it didn't work. So we better just blame them and say that their product is trash, right? Even though they've raised millions of dollars, they have happy customers, clearly working for some people. Like it's a very half-assed way of thinking about it. I think it's lazy. I think people are going to be unpleasantly surprised when they realize how wrong they were on all of
Yeah.
that. And I think it comes from a place of emotion and defensiveness. People they have this like, no, humans are not going to take our job. And like, or sorry, AI is not going to take our job. Like, we need humans, humans, humans. And it's just like, do you want to just get rid of all technology? Like, is that your mindset? Because that's kind of what you're saying. Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you. This is music to my ears. Let's dive into ColdIQ. Give me a sense of what kind of companies are you working with? We just talked a bit about the ICP. Who's best for ColdIQ?
Yeah, typically software companies, making at least 5 million per year in revenue. To have like companies going like doing all the way from 1 million to 200 million per year in revenue. But essentially, if you're a software company, a B2B software company, and you have a high average customer value, like there is a very high likelihood that will be providing some great results for you, just because of the nature of outbound and like the way we run these outbound campaigns, where for us, what's most important is really trying to find this segment of the market that's most likely to want to buy from you right now. And it's like if you're able to be profitable by having a few people who buy from you, then it's gonna be pretty easy to make it profitable for you. So an example is, we have one company that sells Amazon, like it's an Amazon software like that helps you recollect payments, like when there are some merchandises that gets lost. Anyways, they help you with all of that, and they have a pretty high ACV. And so for them, it's like within 2 weeks, they had two people who became customers. And so two people who became customers meant on average 100K ACV, which meant like 2 times 100, which meant 200K closed within 2 weeks, which means that they now can run our services for the next 3, 4 years And even if they don't get anything from this, they'd still be profitable from the service. And so I'm saying this because I want to contrast this with, some cases where when we are trying to deliver results for like some SaaS that have very low ACV, then it means we need a very high volume of conversions to make it work. And we have had some SaaS companies as clients who had, say, 40, 50, 60 meetings, like all the way up to 100 meetings being booked per month. And despite this, they were not profitable because they were selling a 19 per month subscription individually. And so that meant that for us, we would have had to book them 500 meetings per month. But it's like, if you can do this for any sort of company, then you'd be a billionaire, right?
Yeah, it was very much the same struggle I had building out Outbound at Aircall, was that our ACV was relatively low. It wasn't very low, but it wasn't in the enterprise realm, right? Like a 30K ACV would be on the high end for us. And we were building an SDR team in New York, which is expensive. And we also had one in Paris, which we thought was expensive, but actually turned out to be less expensive than New York. And so, it was expensive all around. And yeah, that was the challenge, is like you're looking at that LTV over CAC and you're just like, wow, if we could get the average deal size up, all of this starts to make a lot of sense, because it was working. We were cold calling, we were sending emails, we were bringing in a constant flow of leads and converting them. But it was always sort of that like 1-to-1 or maybe 2-to-1 LTV over CAC. And we were just like, we want to get to that 3-to-1 at least. Because when we looked at our other channels, we were 6-to-1, right? And so it was like, we have this channel where we're buying or we're investing in all of these humans, all this headcount, all of this leadership, but it's like the worst in terms of the payback, right? That we're getting, and it's because it's just expensive. And that's why, like, I think, I don't know, maybe not everyone has that perspective, and it's easy if you're on the SDR team to get defensive about a lot of this stuff. But like, coming from the leadership side, where I know that, like, hey, even when you do everything right and you hire everyone and you train them right, all this sort of stuff, the economics just don't always make sense. And that's why, that alone, it creates a reason and demand for sort of AI and this type of stuff. But I really do encourage people who are listening to just try to remove the defensiveness and think about, like, hey, did cars replace people? Because people used to have to walk places, but now they could just drive there. So cars replaced walking? Like, are we mad about that? I don't think so, right? No one wants to walk far, right? And now you can go farther. So like, I think we need to really be cautious and realize that the tools we invent ultimately will be used in that way to make our lives easier. But let me ask you this question, and this is probably, I would imagine people reach out to you with this question, but if I'm a founder, early stage, maybe I've got a little bit of traction. I've been doing some founder-led sales. Maybe I hired one salesperson or whatever. But I'm at the phase of deciding, do I want to build an in-house outbound team, or do I want to just outsource this? How do you help them make that decision? What's the right way to decide there?
Yeah. The one thing I always tell them is, if they haven't gotten a proven outbound process, is there is a likelihood that it will take time for the campaigns to be profitable. Because it's like, if you already know who to contact and those people are already responding, then we can just add gas to this. It's just this matter of, like, you were contacting 50 people manually of this specific ICP, and you were saying that, and you're telling them X thing, and now it's like, I can do the same thing, almost as well, but be reaching out to way, way more people, and probably I can improve some of your other metrics, such as your deliverability. I can slightly improve your messaging and so on, which means there is a high likelihood in these instances that you're profitable from the get-go. But if you don't have this, then you should know that we'll be trying to find and to help you, look for your best prospect, your best outbound prospect. And this might take times, which means that we might go, say, a few months before you even get profitable, or before you even see results, because you don't know and I don't know who we should target. And so we have our ways to probably test that faster than you would. And so if you're comfortable, just testing, and you see some value in, because we are here to help you, we'll help you test much faster than you would on your own, then I'd say invest then in some outbound motion. Now, if you are tight on cash and you don't have a proven outbound playbook, then I'd say it would be best that you try to uncover this on your own, especially if you have some technical skills. Because I feel like the truth is, the best suited person to make outbound work is the person that has both the product slash industry knowledge and that has the technical knowledge to just, make these ideas come to light. And so typically what we do is we bridge this gap, right? Is we have our teams of GTM engineers who are extremely technical and who have some business savviness so they can really get the information from you and from this understand what's the best campaign to create, what's the best list to build. But there's always this expertise element that comes from the clients. If you have both the expertise and the technical abilities, then you probably would be better off doing it on your own because now you don't have to say lose out some information in this sort of feedback loop, or it's like you talk with the GTM engineers, they talk back, and then like some information gets lost, right? And so for me, it's really this. If you have the budget and you have a proven outbound motion, you're not technical, it's like just leave that to us. We'll probably explode your results. Now, if you don't know who to contact and you cannot afford to invest some money to try to figure it out, then just use your time and figure it out on your own.
This makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think so ideally you want people coming to you who've kind of already figured this out and they're looking to scale it, which is it makes a ton of sense. Now, are you comfortable giving me a sense of sort of what this costs? Like what kind of an investment? Like let's say I haven't done any outbound. I don't want to do it. I'm not an expert. I want you to figure it out for me. What kind of an investment am I looking at? Like I imagine you probably need 90 days to just play around, right? And test things. Can you give me a ballpark of roughly what that looks like?
Yeah, so like typically like we charge some retainers and based on the scope of the work, it will go all the way from 4K to 10K per month. Like that's just like the average. So if you're just starting, you could be looking at the lower end of this. And then typically we'll want you to stay for at least 3 months because the thing is in the beginning there are a lot of things that need to be done. We need to set up the secondary inboxes. Like most of the research happen at the beginning, and like this is gonna be extremely extensive. We need to set up the campaign, set up the tools, and so on. And so we ask for a minimum 3 months commitments. And so, based on what you were saying, like you would be looking at least some initial 13,000 in investment to kind of make it work. And yeah, and once again, is just to jump back on your point, it's like if you see some value in testing faster, then it's all right if you don't have it figured out. But if you want to have some return on investment from the get-go without even having figured it out on your own, then it's probably best that you just find some other vendor because you'll be disappointed, and I don't want you to be disappointed in us.
Yeah, my general advice for founders is like you need to figure things out yourself before you hire people to do them. And I don't just mean outsourcing. I mean even before you bring employees on board, right? The faster a founder wants to hand this responsibility off to someone, usually the messier it gets. There's exceptions to that, right? Like there might be founders who have worked really closely with a sales leader at another company and they just know they can bring that person in and they can figure it out. Like there's scenarios like that. But generally speaking, like you want to be the first person to sell it. You want to be the first person to figure out outbound. Like, because then what happens is if I hire you or I bring in my own team and they start giving me excuses, I'm not like lost. Like I know to tell them like, no, that's wrong or that's right. Like otherwise they can just sell you a bunch of excuses and you sort of end up having no clue what's going on. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
totally with you.
completely agree with you. I
Yeah.
find it easier to outsource things you know how to do than things you don't know how to do because on one hand, you know what to expect because
Yeah.
you've done it yourself. So if you are giving me some excuses, some weak excuses, I'm like, hey, I've done this before. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, same thing even with this podcast. When I set this up, I was going to hire someone to edit it and do all this stuff. It's like, you know what? Let me just like figure out how to do it myself. It's not going to be great and whatever, but at least then like I can realize if I'm going to bring someone on to do this, like, am I getting ripped off? Do they know what they're talking about? And I'll tell you, everyone who pitches me this stuff, they're totally ripping people off. Like they make it sound like it's such an immense amount of work. And like the reality is that it's generally not. And so it's just another example of like, you kind of need to know what you're getting into there. But
That's good to
any
know.
any last advice there? Like if someone's just to say like, what would your top advice be for, building an outbound motion today? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I guess my top advice would be start manually, and I'm talking about all of these tools, but it's like you start manually, you just go send like those 50, 100, 150 messages by just like typing them out. And then at some point, you just try to uncover some patterns. It's like when you do this exercise of writing manually and to actually be looking at prospects one by one, you actually get a sense of who's most likely to be a good prospect for you. And so I think it's tempting to just go buy the tools, get Clay, get LinkedIn, then like have a massive list, send a message to everyone, and then see if someone replies. But you should do the opposite. It's more a question of you look at why would someone be interested in your product in the first place? What what about the person means that they are a good fit for this product, and even like what you think of telling them when you look at this person, say just like one on one. Like what do they have in their experience that probably means that they would be interested in hearing what I have to say. And I feel like once you do this and you do it enough, then you do uncover some patterns. And this is where the gold is in terms of campaigns that you can scale. Lots of people talk about intent buying signals, and typically, you have some very interesting ones, but say like the best intent signal will be very tailored to your situation. And so typically you do want to be looking for stuff that are not that obvious. And the way you find this stuff is by doing the tedious work of looking at each person you want to contact one by one, and then like look at what smart thing can I tell them. And at some point you can scale some smartness in the beginning, just do things that don't scale.
I love it. We are so aligned on everything. I think I saw it was a video of you speaking on LinkedIn somewhere. That's where I came across you. You were talking about AI. I'm like, I have to speak to him. We're totally on the same page. The conversation was even better than I anticipated. So I really thank you for joining me. Any last things you want to throw in there? I know I've got in the show notes, we'll have your Twitter, and coldiq.com is where people can check you out if they're interested in working with you. Anything else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I do most of my content posting on LinkedIn. So if they want to connect on LinkedIn, that's probably the best platform for it. And I'm actually starting a YouTube channel where I'm trying to go very much more in depth, because I find that sometimes LinkedIn doesn't give you enough space to actually articulate all your thoughts, which is one of the reasons why I love this sort of podcast where we can give more context to all of our opinions. Otherwise, we just get, insulted in the comments once we have some opinions that the general public don't like. And yeah, and if anyone needs help, building their outbound motion, and they are, willing to either take the time to see if their unproven outbound motion can work, or if they have a proven motion that they need some help scaling, then ColdIQ can help them. And so they can find us at coldiq.com, and we'll have someone who will help them without hard pitching them.
Awesome. I love it. And you're working with global companies anywhere? Any language constraints or just English?
I mean, we have some people that can do campaigns in German, in Spanish, in French, but most of our clients are in the US. I'd say 95% of our clients are in the US, and so this would be our preferred market. But if you want campaigns done in one of the languages I said, we can help as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me. We'll have to catch up again in the future and see if any of our predictions were right. But I think we're on the money with some of this stuff. You hit a home run on all these topics. So well, let's stay tuned and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's see in 5 years. Thank
Yeah.
you. Great.
Thanks for joining me.
Bye bye.